Welcome back to the FreightWaves Global Supply Chain Summit. I'm joined by Richard Simons, the General Manager of Parts Sales and Marketing for Daimler Trucks North America. We're really glad to have Richard with us this afternoon. We're going to look into the parts business and we're going to talk about how that affects supply chain and how it affects branding and some of the things that Daimler's been able to learn over these months of pandemic, how the internet is now affecting so much of the parts business. And we're just going to kind of dive in. Thanks for being here, Richard.
Thank you. Excited to have the conversation.
Yeah, I just think this is a fascinating time. Obviously, we're seeing so much going on with certainly the semiconductor business right now is affecting so many automakers. Hasn't quite hit the truck business yet, and it may not or may. But that isn't really what we're here to talk about. What we want to talk about is parts, and that's your area. And I guess I just wanted to get a good sense as we get started here. What kind of adjustments did Daimler make? uh, need to make to prioritize the part shipments during the pandemic, Richard?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. And first, before answering that question, if I could just maybe frame the complexities of our network as it pertains to how we have to plan for our supply chain. So of course, we support several brands: Freightliner, Western Star, Thomas Bus, School Bus, things of that nature. But we have over 1,100 dealer and distributor locations that we have to supply parts through. We've got 10 PDCs in the US, parts distribution centers in the US and Canada. We have another one in Mexico. We've got 7 remanufacturing facilities. Um, we've got 17 Alliance part stores and over 100 Alliance stores within a store. So through all of that, supply chain is very critical to getting parts to our PDCs and out to dealers, and then finally out to customers. So if I could just kind of lay out so that the audience understands what we're trying to work through. But through the pandemic, quite frankly, we were able to live our purpose. And our purpose statement is for all who keep the world moving, and that really blossomed through COVID. Um, we have systems like a retail inventory management system called RimPro, which really showed its legs in COVID. It's retail planning, looking at algorithms. Yes, did we tweak it as we got into to COVID? Yes, we did. We did look at that, but we had to establish some new processes, Alan. Things, for example, with our field, they started looking daily at trucks that were down, reporting that and escalating that back up, and we had to use innovative ways to solve that for our customers through the heart of COVID. We had to establish, like many companies, new protocols for safety, distancing, things of that nature. But our PDCs, fortunately, throughout the heart of COVID, all the way up to today, remained open so that we could satisfy our customers. And in fact, our senior vice president, Stefan Kirschner, this week was at one of our PDCs thanking the employees for all that they did to keep the world moving and their dedication. But our dealers, we work with our dealers and through our dealer network development to make sure that we understood which departments within the dealers were impacted by COVID, and that we could make sure that we routed customers to open dealers. Most of our dealers also remained open all throughout COVID. We also kept a pulse on parts. And Alan, I'm going to use not an analogy, but the real life that we all experienced. We stopped the horde, and we saw that happen with what? Toilet paper. You remember, you may have forgotten, but at the beginning of COVID, that people used to joke, does COVID create diarrhea? But because all the toilet paper's gone. But basically, with supply chains, we know that an optimized supply chain is a steady increasing demand or a steady decreasing demand. It gets really tough when you have spikes in demand, up or down, and hoarding creates those spikes. So we work with our dealers, our customers, our suppliers to ensure, Alan, that there was not hoarding going on of parts. And all of those things, I think, really helped us kind of come through the crisis pretty well. And I'll end with this, a little story. We had, I think you recall on the news when the first day the vaccines left the plants. Did you see that on the news?
Oh yeah,
Um,
it's working that day.
yeah, and it was light at the end of the tunnel for most of us, and we were proud about the vaccines leaving, but we were also proud because all of those trucks, those vaccines we're getting on, were Freightliner Cascadias. But that also bared a burden with us because those vaccines had to remain at a certain temperature. If trucks went down, we had to respond very quickly. So we established a new process for the vaccine transports. We used our 724 call center, had a vaccine hotline, and an escalation process to handle that if those vaccines, had some disruption. And oddly enough, the day after Christmas, one of those vehicles had an issue. It was after hours, and we had to exercise that process. The dealer called the 24-hour hotline. We escalated it to our supply chain people, which in turn got it through to our distribution folks. An order after hours went into our Des Moines, Iowa PDC, and ultimately our PDC manager drove in late at night, picked up the part, and drove it to where the customer was to keep it up and going. But those are some of the types of things we had to do to deliver what we call a five-star customer experience right in the heart of COVID. And I think other entities dealing with supply chain have to take similar measures.
Yeah, what we've seen certainly with talking to some of the carriers that are involved. I mean, there are sort of best practices that operate up and down the line, and obviously, if Daimler was involved, then you know what you needed to do because there is no room for error with these shipments of vaccine, and these folks are paying extremely close attention to every aspect, especially trailer visibility and things like that. We've certainly learned a lot about that. What of the things that you described, Richard, during the pandemic and the changes you made, which of those do you think will sort of stick with you as you move forward now?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think all of the new processes that I kind of highlighted, and tools and data, looking at data, I think they can always be with us and become a part of our culture. Um, I will say that branding, I think, is key, and a branding strategy plays a role, and we'll have to focus on that more as we go forward. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have a DTNA part strategy that we want to be the number one stop solution for our customers, in which we have a genuine offering, a premier parts offering for all makes and reman. And then, of course, the third area is a good value line, which is, I talked about earlier, alliance. And that's why we established the stores and the stores within the stores, and we increased our product portfolio in Alliance from 60 lines to 90 because of going forward. The key through supply chain disruptions is parts alternatives. Our customers are driving trucks to move freight. Our customers are the blood of America, or of any country, because every product, good or service, even though it may touch an ocean freight, a plane, a train, it has to touch a truck to get to where it's going. And so the way I look at it, our customers are the blood of America, and so we have to keep them rolling. And to do that, you have to have parts alternatives. Parts alternatives helped us through some of the supply chain disruptions we saw when some of our suppliers had major COVID issues, let's say in Mexico, or they couldn't go to work, or things of that nature. We were able to satisfy our customers' needs through part alternatives. So I think that's critical as we push forward, and data analytics is critical as we look into the future of what may be happening with tariffs and raw materials and things of that nature. So we think that all of this, all of our efforts, the initiatives we put through in COVID, can be used post COVID Alan.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more that occurred to me. You mentioned data analytics. Were you able, or did you find the need to sort of move parts around? Maybe they were planned for a distribution center for, replacement, but you found that there was a certain issue out there that you needed to get to parts to a factory, for example. Because of course we saw 6, 7 weeks of downtime last year, and when you came back, of course you started up a little slowly, but then immediately it was, all to the wall. My question is, were you able to move parts as needed into factories if you needed them there and sort of divert them as necessary?
You must have been working inside of DTNA last year because actually parts went backwards and forwards. So, for example, in the aftermarket, if we needed parts for a truck that was down, and we didn't have it in our PDCs. One of the strategic things that we did was call our friends at our plants that build new trucks, and if they had the part, we work with them to secure the part, and that's always dicey when you're talking about planning a plant operation. But on the flip side, sometimes the plants ran out of material, and we had the material, and we expedited material out of our PDCs to the plants. And the third thing, which you didn't mention, which goes on as well, is between us and our dealers, we have well over $1 billion in inventory. Okay. So sometimes our dealers have that inventory, and we would, in the aftermarket, have dealer to dealer sales and things of that nature. So we have some tools that generate visibility up and down throughout the system. But that's a great point you just raised there.
Yeah, well, I can't say I came up with it by myself, but I have heard that that happened, and the ability, when you mentioned visibility, the ability to do that, I think is critical, and to do it without great disruption to any of the channel partners, right? Um, I guess I want to move over if we can and just talk for a moment. Our time's getting a little short here, but I want to ask you about the online parts ordering, and is that going to eventually dominate the aftermarket world, the parts world?
You know, I think as we look in our personal lives, you would say that digital or e-commerce has become more significant. And in the trucking industry, it has been growing. And I would say that we did something. We launched our platform, a new platform, a state-of-the-art platform called AcceleratorParts.com, and that was launched in 2020 in the depth of COVID. We saw that our demand through our e-commerce platform greatly increased, and quite frankly, Stu McKay and Company, an independent aftermarket assessor or analyst in the marketplace, they thought in 3 years about 15% of the overall parts business would be going through an e-commerce type of a platform, and maybe you've heard that. But based upon on what we're seeing, we think we'll be uh, far exceeding that. We'll hit that a lot sooner. In fact, last year over our prior platform, we saw about a 15% increase just last year over 2019 in terms of orders that were placed via e-commerce and an accelerator.com. And that's because it's the perfect search, find, buy. And it's not just the e-commerce, it's also including e-cataloging, which in heavy trucking, understanding what part it is the right part to put on helps you with uptime. So looking forward, I would say we expect to see in this year, 2021, another 40% plus increase in digital orders through our platform Accelerator. There's others out there, but I think the reason for the growth and the reason why it's here to stay is number one, a good digital experience equals a great customer experience, and customers are, especially in trucking, are looking for ease of doing business. And I think Accelerator and e-commerce tools really help with that ease of doing business.
Mhm. The contrast to that, though, Richard, is that you have announced a pretty significant footprint increase, physical footprint increase, both last year and planned for 2021. They obviously go together. Maybe you can help us understand how that works.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the secret sauce, and if I can just elaborate on that a little bit, just because we think e-commerce is going to be the future, and there's digital plays a lot of roles in all of our lives. Just because of that doesn't mean that we need to get rid of brick and mortar. When I say brick and mortar, I'm talking about our dealers and our PDCs. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 10 PDCs. Those PDCs have over 3.5 million square feet filled with inventory. Okay, in those 10 PDCs, that's backed up with a DDS or direct delivery service that, in essence, delivers parts to our dealers within 12 hours for 90% of our network. And our 1,100 dealer locations and the inventory that they have, like I mentioned earlier, combined over $1 billion of inventory, we can in essence, through Accelerator, deliver parts faster than you experience with Amazon, for example. So take Amazon. You buy something, and if it's Prime, it comes there next day or the day after. Um, but with our e-commerce platform, you order the part, you can have it on your doorstep within hours. Order it late morning, you can have it mid-afternoon. That why? Because our brick and mortar, Alan, our dealers have the part, and they have thousands of parts delivery vehicles that can deliver that part with a matter of hours, not days. So the brick and mortar has to be married with the e-commerce system for it to be extremely powerful
Mhm.
for our customers.
Yeah, you're describing what sounds like a mirror of the Amazon business. Just yesterday I needed some ink for a printer, and I immediately went to Amazon. But before I pushed the button, I thought, well, let me check a certain retailer, and I could not see whether they really had it or didn't. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to go over there and be disappointed. So I just pushed the button, and there we are. And I think that happens an awful lot in all of our homes these days. What I think you've alluded to this a little bit, but how much of the predictive parts, if you will, predictive parts ordering, are you doing now? And do you see this increasing as you're able to learn more from the trucks on the road? And I mean the sensors that are on the trucks and things like that. Are you able to do much with that?
Yeah, there's probably two different paths to that question. Number one, the sensors and things that you talk about in our system, we call it virtual technician, and it, as the truck is operating, captures fault codes, captures things that are happening with the truck, sends messages if you need to service now or if this can be serviced later. And I think going forward, we are working on things that, in essence, take those codes, run them through machine learning, where we say, hey, this typically begets this, right? These parts are going to be needed. We know based upon our integrated systems, that RimPro I talked about earlier, that's integrated with our dealer management systems, we know which dealers have said part. We can schedule appointments. The future is really bright for predictive, right? But there's another path that we're also on, that's also taking a look at, let's say, Alan, you bought 1,000 trucks from us, and they're uniquely spec trucks, right? We're using machine learning to take a look at those 1,000 trucks, look at the vocation in which they're in, compare all the new parts to the VMRS codes, the vehicle maintenance reporting standard codes, and apply that to machine learning and predict when some of those parts may need to be replaced so that we can get the parts loaded, costed, priced, and positioned in PDCs that you'll need them in the right time. And so we're just piloting this, and it's really promising. We looked at some customers' trucks that got built a few years ago, and not too much longer ago, but a few years ago, and we ran this machine learning process through it, and the machine recommended that we start stocking some of the parts. And as we were going through this pilot, that customer started placing orders for some of those parts. So I really am excited about what artificial intelligence or machine learning, data analytics can do for our business and for uptime.
That's a great place to leave this. I think it's a pretty exciting business that you've got going right now. You've got it both in the as you said in the brick and mortar, and you've got it virtual and digitally and working to get yourself to more predictive work, predictive parts ordering. Richard, this has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.